Welcome to the latest edition of the LL Football Roundtable, brought to you by Auto House of Lancaster. We're deep into the postseason now. We've got the games are dwindling down to a few, but they are increasing in significance. The stage is getting bigger, and to talk about it, we've assembled, as we usually do, Jason Guarente, Jeffrey Reinhart. I'm Mike Gross, hosting the proceedings, and we're going to talk about 5 football games. Let's start with why I'm missing in West York in 4A, because we don't know much about West York.
They're young. They have a freshman quarterback.
Wow.
Who has to go to YO on Saturday and play
They've
Spartans.
been down for a while.
And then Ron Miller came back to coach, and now they're winning again. And they won last week 5-3 over Eastern New York. 5-3. Pitchers duel.
Solid bullpen to close that
Good
one.
bullpen.
Right.
Obviously a tough trip for them.
Yeah.
YO's YO, and it's a Saturday, and it's a home game, and it's districts, and they have a shot to go back to the final.
This is one of those where West York's probably, West York could be forgiven for thinking, man, it's great that we're in this spot,
Sure.
just in this spot.
Well, I think YO's going to win.
There you go.
But I think it's interesting that the number 1 seed, which is LS, probably got the tougher draw in that division, in that section, and it shows you
that happens all the time.
Yeah, it doesn't
that's just
really
the
matter.
nature of these power ratings. They're a good tool, but they're an imperfect tool in that way. There's
Somebody of that 3 was going to have to go through the other one in a semi to get through.
And then face the third one in the championship
the other one
game.
in the title game.
Potentially.
Yeah, potentially. But what a year for LL Section 4.
Yeah.
Wow.
Speaking of which, now here is a monster game involving 2 of our teams, Twin Valley and LS.
I was at the first one,
Yeah,
which
were.
was 62-14 and may not have been that close. Twin Valley didn't have its 2 running backs for that game. It's worth noting, Evan Johnson, Drew Engel. That was a factor. It's not the only factor when the margin is that big.
Yeah.
At the time I said, on that night, LS was that many points better. But that doesn't mean they're that many points better the next time. Every time you play a team, it gets harder to beat them. LS is big and physical and fast and at home, undefeated for a reason. Now, can they beat Twin Valley twice? That's really the question.
Hard to do.
But they just, you don't want to fall in love with what you've already seen, but man, they just look so good. It's hard to see them losing to a team they beat by that margin the first time.
You don't want to, I think it is a much different spot, and you don't want to fall in love with what you just saw, but 62 points is 62 points, right?
This is correct. Yeah. Engel's back.
Yeah.
And rushed for 120 and 2 touchdowns last week against Hannah. Evan Johnson's back and healthy. My only concern with Twin Valley would be, are they just too amped? Is it going to be in their head too much? Because sometimes if you just let it mentally get to you, you don't go out and play your best. I'm a little worried about that.
Well, and the something that I've seen in the past in the postseason is teams get into a postseason, they get a matchup with somebody that they already took care of 2 months ago, and they think, we got to play these guys again.
Really.
I think it's a weird spot in some ways, but it's a great matchup. I'm really interested in this game.
Awesome game.
Yeah.
Holy moly. They got to stop House. He rushed for 307 touchdowns, and last week against Elko, House had 3 defensive touchdowns.
It's insane.
2 pick six and a fumble, and he threw a touchdown pass.
One guy had 3
One
defensive.
guy. He's just been
pretty good.
unbelievable. He might, if you had to pick an overall MVP of the league, it might be Caleb House.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
Great. 5A. This is another big one. Another all LL. Conestoga Valley and Exeter.
That should be great. We talked about the first meeting. Exeter went for 2. Did they get it? Did they not get it? Again, with Exeter, I'm afraid of the too amped up. They've had this game circled now for like 4 weeks. They want another shot at
I think
CV.
you're right about that.
They've
I
used it
think
as
that's a real
motivation.
thing.
Yeah.
Potentially,
Yeah, and I think that has a lot to do with why they're here and how they're playing. It's like redemption time, and now they get the Bucks again. I hope they're not too psyched. I hope they could just go in and play.
They certainly have played their best football the last month.
No
right?
doubt.
This season.
No doubt. Zandier's got a shot at 2,000. He needs like 170, but that's very doable for him.
CV, on the other hand, has played their best football for 3 months.
Yep, you've seen them. Bucks are tough.
Undefeated, If we were to say who are the 3 best teams in Lancaster County, LS, CV, and Manheim Township, probably, right? And those are the 3 teams still playing.
Yep.
Exeter went to New Oxford and won. Number 1 seed. Yeah. That's difficult to do. They've had a tough road. They had to play in the initial round because they got an 8 seed, where CV had a bye week. So CV's had more time to rest and get ready. I think the first game is a complete throwout game. I mean, when it comes down to a 2-point conversion in the final seconds, I mean, that either team could have won. CV beat them last year too, so there's sort of that ongoing sense of that we've got your number. I mean, it's a fascinating matchup. I don't think anyone's favored. I think it's just up for grabs.
That's a toss-up. I was worried last week about the rust factor, and Isaiah Sensinig pops the opening kickoff 88 yards for a touchdown for CV last week, and I was like, okay, no rust.
But sometimes that's fool's gold. I mean, but yeah, I hear you. Yeah, there you go. Now 6A, we're in the semis, and it's both semifinals involve LL teams. Wilson and Central York.
It's interesting. This is another case where I think you'd rather be the 2 seed than the 1 seed, because Wilson gets Central York and Township gets Harrisburg, which has been sort of the perennial champion. No matter who has home field in this tournament, it goes through Harrisburg. Don't we agree with that?
Yeah.
And Township has beaten Central York. Wilson has beaten Township. I just think to me that could go either way. I will say this: Wilson and Central York played a really memorable game. Bo Prabula's final high school game.
Right.
Wilson went into Central York, which was the number 1 seed, and beat them on a missed field goal at the end. It's one of the best high school games I've ever seen. So there is some playoff history between these 2 teams.
There is. Was that the 14-11 game?
Yeah,
it was like tied at 11, I think, at one point.
The field goal would have won it. They had to decide whether to go for a touchdown on 4th and 15 or kick the field goal. They tried the field goal. And
Wilson's been really good. And
I'm just going to say, similar to Exeter, playing their best football at the right time.
Did we ever say Wilson's flying under the radar around here? But they kind of have.
If they were 10-0 instead of 9-1, we probably would have talked about them all season. But they had that loss early, and they kind of fell into Township's shadow because Township was undefeated.
Exactly. They're number 2 in the league in offense. They're number 2 in the league in defense. Yeah. I mean, they're having a great year.
But most of that is in the second half of the season. I mean, they barely got past Cedar Crest in the regular season.
That was a good game.
They were laboring there early. A little bit. They really figured it out. Now, Harrisburg and Township. Let's talk about that a little bit in terms of the matchup.
3rd year in a row.
Yeah, they have a history.
Yeah, Harrisburg's beat them the last 2 finals, overtime last year, which was a kick in the gut.
After Township beat them, 38-6 in the regular season?
Township was going to win districts last year. Remember? It was the Streaks year. They're going to win. And they were leading in the 4th quarter and couldn't put it away. Harrisburg's playing better. They have a couple of losses, but I think that just kind of chisels them. And like Jason said, it's their time of year. It goes through Harrisburg. No matter where the game is, it really doesn't matter.
And they destroyed Dallastown in the quarterfinals.
Yeah, they picked them apart. Yeah. Township, 14-7 last week. You saw them. They got a big pick 6.
Yeah, they got a 100-yard interception return for a touchdown, and they also had an interception in the end zone at the end of the game. 14 penalties.
Again, we talked about
that. That's a real problem for
some. It's getting to a point where it's a self-fulfilling prophecy now. I mean, some of those calls were, not the most egregious penalties. Yeah, and it took them out of their Declan Clancy running game because now they're in 2nd and 22 or whatever.
That's right.
And when they could just give it to Clancy and march down the field, they were able to score, but they were in so many down and distance situations that were unfavorable. They had trouble scoring points. It was really windy. It was hard to throw. So it was, not necessarily predictive of what's to come. I'm not counting Township out in this game. I know everyone thinks Harrisburg's going to win because they won the last 2. Township is better up front than they've been the other 2 meetings.
Yeah. And probably better defensively.
And certainly better defensively.
That's kind of been their bread and butter.
So the sort of the glamorous stuff that you love, like the Hayden Johnson high-flying passing game isn't there. Yeah. But maybe they can grind this out. Maybe they can put together some long drives and keep Harrisburg from putting up 40 points.
Yeah, they got to keep the yellow hankies off the field. Yeah, for sure. They can't have 7 15-yard personal foul flags against Harrisburg because Cougars are quick strike. They can get you real quick.
We talk a lot about the haves and the have-nots in this sport. Well, where the have-nots are gone now, folks.
Pretty much.
This is the big leagues. and a lot of big football games coming this weekend. We'll have a chance to break all of those down when we do this again next week. This has been the LL Football Roundtable, brought to you by Auto House of Lancaster. For Jason Guarente and Jeffrey Reinhart, and for Mike Gross. We'll see you next week.